Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Alaikum assalam.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله. الحمد لله. الحمد لله. سبحان الله ولا الحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. والله أكبر ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد. Ramadan Mubarak to everybody. It's the first we finished. Will be a week now that we're into Ramadan. Alhamdulillah. We explained last week what we'll be doing for the month of Ramadan for all of our viewers. Is we're going to focus a little bit more on some Islamic sharing knowledge and discussing Islamic topics, and connecting more to religion because it's the month of Ramadan, and staying away from more of the cult deviation stuff that we usually talk about, inshallah. Even though it is hard because some people keep doing silly things. Oh, and we might touch on something today if we have time.
The kind of
Um,
change to it, but yeah.
yeah. So this is I'm gonna try to share my screen. I was gonna try to get it done and send it to Amr beforehand, but we're
Nah,
gonna have
Allah.
time
All
to
right.
see how it goes.
We pray.
It's a PowerPoint, so we should be good.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So this is it's going to be kind of a presentation, but I want it to be open. So if anybody has any questions, um, just fire them up in the chat boxes. You can hit us up on the messengers as well, and we'll try to answer them as we go. Again, we're going to try to keep the shows pretty short, within an hour, inshallah, to respect everybody's time during Ramadan. So with that, let me start sharing my screen. Here we go. Okay. Share. What about window? Yeah, we got window. I guess it doesn't matter. Here we go. All right, let's see if this works. Oops. Okay. Does everybody see it?
No, you're showing your web browser.
A web browser?
Yes, you're showing your web browser. You're showing the Zoom.
It's showing PowerPoint now.
No. Try
Okay,
stopping the
let's
share and
try
then
this
start it again.
again.
Yeah.
We're gonna get it. We're gonna get it, y'all. Inshallah. Here we go. Let me try this now.
There you go.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, that's the last slide, but it doesn't matter. All right, here we go. So we're going to talk about the introduction to Ulum al-Quran, excuse me. Bismillah. And this is not going to be, it's not a class. It's not like we're just having a quick presentation, discussion about, and it's going to be how we say a mile long and an inch deep.
Yeah.
Because the science of Quran is, this is our religion. This is the Quran. So there's so many sciences, there's so many topics that you can delve into, but we don't have time to do that. And my intentions, inshallah, is to try to motivate people to study the Quran more, to look into any of these topics that they're interested in, to learn more about the Quran, because this is how we understand our religion. And we'll talk more about that. But inshallah, and if anybody, we'll talk about it again at the end. If anybody is interested in having, setting up a discussion series where we can talk about these things, and go over some of the things that I've learned and share things that you guys have learned in your classes and studies, we can do that if you're interested in doing that. But just, you can contact us through our email, or if you have our numbers, message us and we can set that up. So let's get right into it without wasting any time, and just jump in. Anybody, Amr, anybody in the chat message, just jump in whenever you have a question. So the importance of understanding the sciences of the Quran, and is boiled down to one hadith. There's plenty of other evidences, but this one covers it the best. Is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "The best of you are those who learn the Quran and teach it." So the best of you are those who learn and teach the Quran. A lot of times this hadith is used in isolation, referring to people who teach recitation or memorization. But this hadith is general, and it actually refers to any of the sciences of the Quran because they all help us understand the Quran and help us be better Muslims. So any aspect of the sciences that I'm going to talk about today that you learn or that you teach to others, you are putting yourself in that category of being the best amongst us. So right now, today, within this hour, we're going to be amongst the best of people because we're learning and teaching some of these aspects. So what I'm going to do first is do a quick little pre-quiz, and just you could jot down the answers yourself, keep it in your mind, but it'll kind of give you a little basis of where you are as far as your understanding of the various sciences of the Quran. So first, what does the word Quran mean? What does it mean? Second, what are the names of the Quran? What are the names of the Quran? Third, who first compiled the Quran? What is the first surah revealed? What does Asbab Nuzul mean? What does Nasikh and Mansukh mean? What are the principles of tafsir or the methodology of tafsir? Are English translations of the Quran considered the Quran? How many qira'at are there, or how many modes of recitation are there? And the last one, what is the greatest miracle of all time? So Amr, out of any of these questions, are there any that you absolutely do know, or some that you have
I
no
know
clue?
about like maybe 3 or 4 of them. I know that the Quran was compiled because the death of Sahabas who Hufaz and Abu Bakr and Umar can compile it together.
Yep.
I do know the greatest miracle of all time is the Quran. The first surah is Iqra, that's the first one. The Quran means I should know this. It means to read, right? Or something like that.
What's that? Yep. It means to read or that which is recited. Yep. That's pretty much.
And yes, the English translations consider the Quran. I'm not sure. I don't remember. I think that's all I remember off the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're going to be, I wanted to make this quiz a little bit elaborate, but I ran out of time and just had to come up with these real quick before I started jumping online. But you'll be surprised that a lot of these things that we think are the like set answer to certain things, that there's actually more than one answer for a lot of this stuff. So, and we'll get into it too. So the sciences of Quran. So the sciences of Quran include pretty much anything that's related to the Quran. It includes recitation. It includes a history of the Quran. It includes the interpretation of the Quran. Anything that relates to the Quran is included in the umbrella of sciences or ulum of Quran. And of course, the obvious benefits of these sciences, which the reason why the Quran was revealed is so that we can understand it and implement it in our lives. You know, all these things play a role in our understanding of the Quran, even the recitation. You know, the recitations, the different types of recitations that are out there, they play into the meaning of the ayats. Yeah. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But go ahead. You had something to say, Amr?
Oh no. I was just going to say that we said in the beginning how the best amongst you are those who read and teach the Quran and live it, right? So you shouldn't really disparage those who do teach the Quran in any way, shape, or form, if you can avoid it. Because if they're upon the Quran and Sunnah, then you should not disparage them for what they may not have to do that satisfies you.
Exactly. Good point. So we'll get into the Quran. What is the meaning of the Quran? The word Quran. We call it the Quran, but what does it actually mean? So Amr had mentioned that it means, to be read, recitation.
Yeah.
But there's actually difference of opinions of what Quran actually means. So the most popular opinion, or the strongest opinion, is that it's that which is to be read, or that is that which is to be recited, or recitation, but because it comes from a certain Arabic root word. But there's another opinion that says that it's actually a proper noun, like the Torah, right? The Torah is just the Torah. The Injil is just the Injil. So they hold the opinion that the Quran is its own meaning in itself, that it's the Quran, that book is the Quran. That's the meaning. Another meaning is that it comes from another Arabic word with the same similar root, which means to join together. And the ones that hold this opinion say that the surahs actually join together or connect together, right? Which is actually true. And the last opinion is that it means that which resembles something. And each surah resembles the surahs. They all resemble each other. So that's another opinion. But the strongest is that it means, recitation or reading, that which should be read or recited. The words in the Quran, the Quran itself, for Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'at, we believe that the Quran is the uncreated word of Allah. It's the uncreated kalam of Allah. So we can get into a lengthy discussion of this. And again, any one of these topics we could talk about for a whole show. But this is to sum it up. Do not confuse that with the actual physical paper and ink that you are holding when you read, right? We are not saying, as Muslims, as Sunni Muslims, we're not saying that, oh yeah, that ink and that paper is the uncreated word of Allah.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't want to. I'm trying to resist going down into tangents so we can cover all this, but it's tempting. So I'm gonna hold off. So we call it the Quran, but the Quran has multiple names in the Quran. Allah refers to it as the Quran. He refers to it as the Kitab, Furqan, Dhikr, and Tanzil. The Kitab means book. Yeah. Furqan means criterion. Dhikr means remembrance. Yeah. And I forget what Tanzil means. Don't remember that one. But there's different names in the Quran. So you can call it the Kitab, the Furqan, the Dhikr. These are all acceptable names of the Quran.
Wait. I think Tanzil is revelation, I want to say. Might be. Yeah.
Okay. I think
I remember right. That, yeah.
That sounds about right.
But don't quote me on that. Actually, I'll look it up.
All right, yeah, go ahead, Google that.
Yeah. Shake Google. All right. Yes.
Yep, there we go.
Tanzil is the Arabic term for revelation of the Holy Quran of origin. All right, cool. We're good. All right, shake Google. Way to go.
All right, now, so Wahi. Of course, the Quran is Wahi. When we say Wahi, and in the word Wahi, Islamically, it's come to mean a specific thing in our religion, which means like revelation. But according inside the Quran, Wahi has several different meanings, and there's actually 7 types of Wahi. So, and I didn't have time. We don't have time to put all the proofs and all the ayats that support every one of these. Remember, I said we're going a mile long and an inch deep. So, on your own time, if you want to see the support for these, you can ask me and I can direct you, or you can look them up yourselves, which is a good thing to do. Just use acceptable sources. So Allah refers to Wahi in the Quran when he's talking about the natural order of the universe, right? So like we're talking about the sun rising, setting, the whole cosmos, everything, laws of physics. This is also Wahi. Animal instinct. You have the ayats about the bee, where Allah inspires the bee to build its nests or its hives in certain places. That's animal instinct is a type of Wahi. All the geese flying south for the winter, that's a type of Wahi. Of course, you have also human intuition, where Allah inspires stuff in our hearts to just do something. You have the example of Musa alayhi salam's mother, who was inspired, or her intuition, a natural instinct and intuition, or the instinct that when first she had the intuition where he inspired her to put Moses in a basket in a river, right? Which actually goes against human instinct, but she had a strong intuition to like put her baby in a river.
And it worked
right?
out, yeah.
And then of course Allah saved them, and then Moses' mother was a servant and ended up breastfeeding her own son, which is actually a part of human instinct, because it's human instinct for like a mother
to take care of her kids.
Take care of her kids, breastfeed her kids. This is what we do, right? So it refers to that. And it also refers to gestures. And if you remember with the Prophet Zechariah, one of the things he had to do when he was blessed with the miracle of having a child at old age was Allah told him that he had to, the word he used was wahi, but he had to gesture. He couldn't speak. So he had to communicate with pretty much sign language. He had to use his hands and like gestures to communicate with people. That's a form of wahi. Allah also refers in the Holy Quran to that shaitan and the devils. They give wahi. They inspire people. Allah also gives wahi to the angels, where he gives them commands and wahi to do things. But the one of course, we're concerned about is wahi to prophets, because the Quran is wahi to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so there's two different types of prophetic wahi, or wahi in general. Revelation is that it could come without an intermediary or with an intermediary. And when it comes without an intermediary, it comes in the forms of dreams, which, you know, if anybody familiar with the hadith where someone would say, I would have a dream, or it's from Aisha actually, where someone would have a dream and it would come true the next day. These are true dreams, right?
Premonition of sorts, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have the dream of Ibrahim alayhi salam when he was told to sacrifice his son.
Yeah.
Yep. Then you have direct speech, and this is like a high level because it's only reserved to two prophets, Prophet Musa alayhi salam and Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yeah.
Allah spoke directly to Musa through the burning bush and directly to Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Mi'raj. The second way, which is the most common way, is through an intermediary, where he sends one of his angels, which is Angel Jibrail, to give the message or the revelation. So real quick, I wanted to talk about Hadith Qudsi as it relates to Wahi. And there's a difference between the Quran and Hadith Qudsi. And some people, like, until you hear it, you don't really understand. Like you hear Hadith where Rasul says, Allah said so-and-so. This is a Hadith Qudsi. So this is what Allah said, but it's not part of the Holy Quran. And the major differences of that is, so the Quran was revealed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam with exact words and meaning. Okay, remember that. Words and meaning. Qudsi, however, are related to Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam or to us in meaning, not exact words, right? Because hadith, they also come through the Sahabas, right?
Yeah.
So it's meaning, not exact words. Another big difference is that you get worship just for reciting and reading the Holy Quran, whether you understand it or not, right? There's no credit for worship for reading Hadith Qudsi. So like if you decided, like after Fajr, you do your program, you get up and you start reading the Holy Quran, you can't replace that and think you're getting benefit by, oh, I'm just going to start reciting Hadith Qudsi.
Yeah.
Right? You do get credit for seeking knowledge for reading Hadith Qudsi, but it's not an actual act of worship to just read Hadith Qudsi. Like, the Holy Quran, we'll talk about a little bit later too, is that you get credit for every letter, right? 10 barakat for just one letter of the Holy Quran. It's not the same for Hadith Qudsi. And finally, it's a Hadith Qudsi. There's fabricated Hadith Qudsis. Yep. There's no such thing as fabricated Quran. No such thing. It's
all the same. Yep.
Right. So just keep that in mind when you run into Hadith Qudsis. They're not held. It's not the same level as Holy Quran. So we just talked about Wahi, revelation, and so we'll talk about the first and the last revelation. And again, and I broke it down very simple to like the ones that have the strongest opinions, but there's multiple opinions about what the first revelation is. we should have all heard the story of, you know, Rasul in Cave Hira. He heard Iqra, read in the name of your Lord, which is Surah Alaq, right? We've all heard that story, that because that's the strongest opinion. But there's other opinions. There's opinions that the first ayah in Surah Mudathir was the first revelation. There's opinions that the Fatiha was the first revelation. There's different opinions, but they're weak. They're weak opinions. This is the strongest. So we all know the first revelation, but we never really think about the last revelation. And if someone would have asked me before I learned this, and they say, "What's the last revelation?" I would automatically think that the ayah in Surah Ma'idah that says, "Today we have perfected your religion," was the last, right? Kind of just logical sense, but it's actually not. Even though that is one of the opinions, and there's multiple opinions on this, but the strongest opinion is that it's the ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah 281. And then when you hear it, it kind of makes sense that it's the last revelation. So Allah says, "And fear a day when you will be returned to Allah. Then every soul will be compensated for what it earned, and they will not be treated unjustly." And it makes a lot of sense that this is the last ayat revealed, because it kind of sums up like the whole reason why we have all this, why we are here, why we have the Quran, is because we're going to return to Allah and we're going to be judged, right? So it makes sense. So that's the first and the last revelation. So when we get into the actual ayats, or the surahs and ayats of the Quran, you have this topic of Mecca versus Medini surahs, or even ayats. And there's difference of opinion of what this actually means, or how you determine or classify these surahs. So Mecca means, you know, Mecca. Medini means Medina. And the difference of how you determine these is the strongest and most popular way that they're determined or categorized is by time. And so when I say time, I mean that if Rasulullah ﷺ was in Mecca before Hijrah, right before Hijrah, and the ayats or the surahs were revealed in before Hijrah, which is the time stamp, then they are considered Mecca verses. If they were revealed after Hijrah, they are considered Medini or Medina verses or surahs. But there's differences. Some scholars used place, like if they're actually revealed in Mecca, or if they're actually revealed in Medina. But that doesn't compensate for surahs that were revealed in neither. Right?
Yeah.
Then some classified by who they're actually addressing. Are they addressing the Medina?
Mecca, yeah.
But again, that doesn't address the surahs that are not addressing either group, like people of the book, right? So by time is the most popular choice. And whenever you hear anybody generally talking about Mecca versus Medina surahs, they're talking about surahs that were revealed before and after Hijrah. Okay. And just some themes. So for Mecca surahs, it's all about Tawheed, Aqidah, and morality. Things that just make you like a good overall person with sound belief, right? And they're generally shorter. So like the last Jews, like they're primarily, I think they might be all Mecca, because they're shorter. They rhyme a lot more. They don't have anything to do with like laws or anything like that, because they're trying to get all the Muslims on the correct belief. And that's why when we talk on different things in our show, the most important thing for a Muslim is to have the correct belief, right? And again, don't mix up Tawheed with Aqidah, because Tawheed is an aspect of Aqidah. Tawheed is the most important thing. Then there's other aspects of Aqidah that Rasul was training them on when he was in Mecca. The Medini surahs, they have to do with like all the rituals. This is when you have the, Hajj, Ramadan, you have the laws, like the punishments for different crimes. It addresses like hypocrites, the people of the book, because this is the environment that they're in now. They got their Aqidah set. Okay, so now how do we practice our Aqidah?
Yeah.
That's when they're in Medina, right? Everything, the way Allah does everything, makes total sense, perfect guidance for us, and it's one of the miracles of the Quran. And they're usually longer. Like you have Surah Al-Baqarah, which is the longest surah in the Quran, and that's a Medini surah. So, and just real quick, you can have so when you say a surah is Medini, it doesn't necessarily mean that all the ayats
Revealed in Medina.
revealed in Medina. And just because a surah is Mecca doesn't mean that all the ayats were revealed in Mecca. So you can have a Mecca surah that may have 2 or 3 Medini ayats in it, right? So just keep that in mind. Real quick. Okay. So another concept of Islamic sciences or Quranic sciences is the asbabun nuzuls. Okay. So asbabun nuzul literally means the cause or the circumstance of revelation. Okay. The circumstance of revelation. And this is important in Quranic sciences because the circumstance of which an ayat or a surah was revealed helps us understand the meaning of the ayat or the surah and how to implement it. Right? So we if we didn't know that, we could take things out of context. A perfect example is about the ayat in, I don't know what surah it's in, but it's the ayat about I'm not gonna say what's about, it's gonna ruin it, but it's the ayat that says, "Go unto your wives are like your fields, like go unto your fields as you wish, or plow your fields as you wish," right?
Yeah.
So without any context, you could think of a bunch of different ways to interpret that, but the context gives us the understanding that Allah was talking about sexual relations with your wives. Right? Someone's abusive. If they didn't have that context, they could say, you know what? Allah says I could do whatever I want with my field, so I could do whatever I want with my wife. So I could beat her, I could not feed her, I could do whatever. No, that's you have to have the specific context to understand the meaning of the ayat. So the asbab nuzuls, or the cause of revelations, they have to come from hadith. They have to come from hadith. No one can come afterwards and say, hey, you know what? This is the meaning, or this is why this ayat was sent down, or this is the circumstances surrounding this ayat. Even if it makes total sense, we can't do that. There's even a difference of opinion of some say that you can take the narrations of the first generation after the Sahabas as causes because they would have heard it directly from the Sahabas. But there's some that say, no, you can't even do that. So if some sheikh or alleged scholar comes and starts giving you asbab nuzuls that don't have a hadith with it, then it's to be discarded.
What?
Okay. So there could be multiple asbab nuzuls for one ayat, which of course, there's a methodology to accepting the right one. Of course, you go to the most authentic narration. Then if they're both on the same authenticity level, then you go to the one that's more specific, because some hadiths will say specifically this surah was revealed because of XYZ. Then there'll be some that'll be more general. So there's a whole methodology to that. And there could be multiple ayats that have one asbab nuzul, one circumstance, and there's different methodologies for figuring that out. And it's also possible that Allah revealed multiple ayats for one situation, and it's possible that Allah revealed an ayat, and it has happened multiple times for multiple situations. Okay, so the compilation of the Quran, and Amr was absolutely correct that the first actual compilation of the Quran was done by Abu Bakr under the convincing of Umar radiallahu an, and it was because a bunch of Hufaz died or got martyred in a battle. It wasn't a battle. I think they got tricked and they were martyred by a tribe.
Yeah.
But they were like afraid, like, oh, what happens if all the Hufaz go away? So Umar convinced Abu Bakr to have the Quran actually compiled into a single book. During the life of Rasulullah, the Quran was kept primarily by memorization. He sent teachers to different tribes and different locations to teach the Quran. And some of the companions had their own personal copies, but it wasn't like the whole Quran, the entire Quran. It was maybe some surahs that they thought were important, or maybe that they were practicing. And it was kept like on bones,
Camel
paper,
leather.
like
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, wood, palm leaves, like just all scattered all over the place. And that's where Abu Bakr had Zayd, radiallahu anh, actually compile everything. And he had a very strict criteria. Like there had to be 2 witnesses. If it was anything written down, it had to be specifically approved by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's how we got our first, what do you call a mushaf, which is a mushaf is the Quran compiled together. Then during the caliphship of Uthman, radiallahu anh, Islam was expanded, outside of Arabia, outside of the Hijaz. And there's different types of recitations, and people were arguing with each other of what was the correct recitation. People were making mistakes in their recitations. So Uthman decided to gather all the mushafs together, all the different versions of the mushafs, all the different types of recitations that were going on, and put them into one book. And then he burned all the other copies. So some of you who don't know this, maybe thinking like he burned the Quran. Well, you have to think, in our Western culture, like burning a book is like the ultimate sign of like disrespect, or that's Western culture. Islamically, this is actually the respectful way to dispose of a Quran, is you actually burn it. Okay, so that's what he did.
You can't just have a law's name just on the ground. So you have to dispose of it in a proper way.
Exactly. There's some cave somewhere where there's like all these Qurans just like bundled up and stored, and they're like, I need to find a YouTube. I'll post in our chat. It's just like stacked up Qurans everywhere, because they didn't know what to do with them. But anyway, the beginning and ending of surahs, and this is also a science that you can look into and study. This is actually really deep when you get into it. But so the beginning of surahs, they could start with the disjointed letters. And if anybody knows what those are, they are like, for instance, the alif, lam, mim, or the yasin. Those are called the disjointed letters. There's 29 surahs that begin with these, and there's actually 14 letters that are used in the Quran. There's difference of opinions on what they mean, what they possibly could mean. But the safest opinion is that Allah knows best the meanings. We don't know them. We can gain some insight as to why Allah included these letters when we don't actually know the meanings. And some of them is to maybe humble mankind, to show that we don't know everything. Other explanations could include like it was to bring attention to the Arabs, to so that they listen to the Quran. Another explanation is that it shows the Arabs that, look, Allah is revealing this Quran in your language, in the Arabic language. So there's a bunch of meanings, and like one of the explanations, one of the theories is that they actually stand for different names of Allah. Like Alif stands for Allah, Lam stands for Latif. But we don't know for sure. Allah knows best what the meanings are. So anybody telling you like, oh, I know exactly what these means, or my sheikh knows exactly what they mean, they're not on the right track. Ayats also begin with the glorification of Allah, right? You have the Fatiha, Alhamdulillah. Some call people. Allah is like, yeah, ayyuhan nas, yeah, ayyuhal ladina, calling people. Allah begins with oaths, like what's one? Well, asr, Allah is making an oath. He's swearing by something. They begins with conditions, commands, questions, warnings, and causes. It's interesting about the ending of surahs. They usually end, they're very comprehensive and forceful ayats. But the real cool thing is when you look into the scholars, they have whole books on these, into how the end of each surah actually connects to the beginning of the same surah. Not only that, the end of each surah connects with the beginning of the next surah.
Because
And it's
I'm pretty sure like it's sort of Tauba, right, where it doesn't have Bismillah Rahim, because they we're not sure if sort of Tauba was the continuation of sort of Al Anfal, or if it was the same surah or not. So like it doesn't have
exactly,
the,
yep.
so it continues together. Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly correct. And it's just it's an amazing science when like these scholars that they dedicated their lives to the Quran, and they can make all these connections and relate this information to us. It's really amazing, and it shows just the miracle of the Quran, the complete miracle. It's the only miracle we have just with us today, right now. On our shelves, we can read it, we can connect with Allah. It's beautiful. Ahruf. This may be a new concept to a lot of us. So the ahruf, which is different than qiraat, the ahruf was the various ways that the words of the ayat were actually read. So when Rasulullah, when Allah revealed the Quran to Rasulullah, there was like 7 different dialects of the Arabs of that time. So if we kind of compare it to what we have now in English, we have American English, and then you have like British English,
yeah,
like the Queen's English, right? There's words that mean the same thing, but they're completely different, right? Like just completely different. Like even in America, like we can take an example. Like I could say, give me a soda, and someone else say, give me a pop. We had it in the room. Someone could say hoagie, give me a sub,
a hero,
hero. These all mean the same thing. So if we apply that back to the time of Rasulullah, if Rasulullah went to a certain region or a certain tribe and used a word that they didn't use for something, they wouldn't understand what he was saying. So he would use, Allah revealed it in the words that they would understand, right? And the beautiful thing about it is that these 7 ahruf didn't actually change the meaning of the Quran whatsoever. Still had the same exact meaning. So it's actually it's a miracle of the Quran. A lot of Orientalists or enemies of Islam try to use this to try to say like the Quran's not perfect and these types of things, but they really have no argument whatsoever. It's their lack of understanding of the science of the Quran. So there's the question of, do the 7 ahruf still exist? And like a lot of things, there's differences of opinions. And when for anybody listening, when we say differences of opinions, we mean acceptable differences of opinion.
Yeah, between scholars.
Yeah. Exactly. So like you can't just say, oh, I have a difference of opinion, or there's a difference of opinion out there that's actually not supported by the Quran and Sunnah or accepted by the companions of Rasulullah, right? Or the scholars of Islam. Like you have to be within that box. So like there's no secrets of the Quran. Everything is known, right? Everything is known. Someone can have extra insight to something and expound on something, but everything is known. So one opinion is that there's only one ahruf, or let's say dialect, left after Uthman compiled everything into his Musaf. So that there's only one left, and that's the ahruf that Uthman compiled, right? Some say that all the ahruf actually exist within the current Musaf that we have, which is the Uthman compilation. And the strongest opinion is that during his compilation, Uthman and the Sahabas preserved as many of the ahruf as possible. So there's portions of the various 7 ahruf that are still in the Musaf that we have today. And so like so this is the argument that people try to use, non-Muslims try to use against the Quran, is because one of our biggest things is that the Quran is the only word of Allah or word of God that has been preserved.
Hasn't been changed.
Nothing's been changed. So when they run into this topic, they think they got like a Easter egg, like, oh, we got them now because all the dialects aren't preserved, right? But it's like, well, no, Allah had us preserved. The meaning doesn't change, right? And the words of Allah that He revealed are still preserved the way that the way that He revealed them to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this leads us into our discussion about Qira'at. So Qira'at is not ahruf. Qira'at is referring to the actual rules and the manners of recitation. So the Qira'at comes from the ahruf, right? But you can have multiple Qira'at for like one ahruf. You see what I'm saying? So the words that are used in the Quran could be different when He revealed them to Rasul during his time to the different tribes. But all the words we have in the Quran now today are all exactly the same. Like we have one, right? And the Qira'at would say, well, how exactly do we recite that one word? Which could, depending on which mode or which authentic Qira'at you're following, could change. All Qira'ats must trace back to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. See, there's a common theme with everything in Islam. Common theme. Everything traces back to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah. Everything, right? Quran and Sunnah, Quran and Sunnah, Quran and Sunnah. So the Qira'at, it all traces back to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Just similar to like schools of thought, like with the madhabs, where there used to be tons of madhabs, tons of like, not tons, but dozens of madhabs. There used to be dozens of Qira'at, but all of them haven't survived through the test of time. Currently, we have 10 authentic Qira'at that exist. But 95% of the world, we follow the Qira'at of Asim, right? So if you have an Ijaza, most likely you have an Ijaza, or if you're a Qari or Ijaza in recitation, it's on the mode of Asim. So, and I just talked about how Ahruf is different than Qira'at. So just generally just covering some Quranic terms so that when you hear them, you recognize them and you know to look them up, to what they mean. You have Muhkam or Mutashabi ayats, which is clear ayats versus unclear ayats. You have Haqiqa versus Majazi, which is literal versus metaphorical. You have Am versus Khas, which is general versus specific. You have Mutlaq versus Muqayyid, which is unconditional versus conditional. Mantuk, which is apparent, versus Mafhum, or not explicit. So real quick, I just touch a little tidbit on Muhkam versus Mutashabi. Muhkam ayats are, so like when you run, like sometimes when you're talking to people, and especially in the line of work that most of us are involved in, you give somebody a Muhkam ayat, right? Which is a clear, there's no ambivalence, there's no difference of opinion, there's no interpretation, like there's a clear meaning to the ayat. And then they will respond to like, well, you know, there's difference of opinions, you know, it could be unclear. Allah may, no. With Muhkam, with clear ayats, there is none of that. And even with Mutashabi, where it says unclear ayats, they have a clear meaning. It's just that they aren't specific in just the actual words that are being presented by Allah. Okay. So next, specifically, I also want to talk about Nasikh and Mansukh, because this has to do with actually practicing. Well, they all have to do with practicing our religion, but this is actually a big topic in Islam. This all has to do with abrogation, right? And the clearest example we have of this that we all should know about is the example of alcohol in the Quran, right? So some of you may not know, the Muslims, the Sahaba, while they're Muslim, some of them drank alcohol at a certain time, because it wasn't outlawed yet, right? And multiple ayats came down abrogating. If you don't know what abrogating means, it means canceling the previous ayat. So, like in short, first the Sahabas, the rule was don't come to Salat drunk. So they could drink as long as they weren't drunk, they could still make Salat. Then eventually it got to the point it was like, you can't drink at all, which is what applies to us today. You are not allowed to drink. So the ayah of you are not allowed to drink alcohol canceled or abrogated the ayah of don't come to Salat drunk. So just understand the Arabic, the nasikh is the canceller or the abrogator of the mansuk. And just a little way to kind of remember it, if you go in alphabetical order, mansuk starts with M, nasikh starts with N comes after M. So whatever comes after the ayat cancels the previous one.
Yep.
Right? And there's conditions, of course, like the rulings have to directly contradict each other, right? Not drinking at all directly contradicts the ayat of you could drink, but don't come to Salat drunk, right? The nasikh has to be revealed after the mansuk, right? So you can't have an ayat that cancels something that was revealed after the first revelation, right? And of course, it has to be from the Quran and the Sunnah. It has to be from the Hadith. Someone can't just, like today, read the Quran and be like, yeah, I think this ayat cancels the other ayat. It doesn't work that way. And there's also a whole discussion you can have on, because you can have Quran ayats that cancel Quran ayats. You can have Quran ayats that cancel Hadith. You can have Hadith that cancel Quran ayats. And you can have Hadith that cancel Hadith. And there's like a difference of opinion and of like, so for instance, some say that for a Hadith, some say that Hadith can't cancel Quran ayats, which is a valid opinion. Some say that the Hadith has to be mutawatir and reach a certain classification to cancel the ayat. So there's a whole discussion in that as well. Let's see. So we all should have some clue or some idea of the miracles of the Quran, right? We see videos of them all the time. We use them to give dawah. We use them to prove our religion. And there's literacy or literary miracles. There's miracles in the stories. There's lots of scientific miracles. But the main thing I want to emphasize is that the Quran itself and absolutely everything in it is a miracle, right? Is a miracle. It is the greatest miracle of all time, contrary to what some people may believe. It's the greatest miracle of all time. It's the greatest miracle of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's the greatest miracle of all the prophets. We still have this miracle with us today. Okay. And just to touch on some of the scientific miracles, we do not want to end. We, as Muslims, we are a very scientific culture, or at least we used to be. Historically, Muslims are very scientific. And our science, our culture of science comes from the Quran, comes from Muslims, right? Because before that, remember, Rasulullah came to the ignorant Arabs. They didn't know how to read, write. They had no culture, no society, anything, right? And then scientific discoveries that we still use today came from the Ummah, the Muslims. But we do not, like for instance, like Christians. A lot of Christians that are literalists, they become a joke when dealing with, like, for instance, creationists, right? So some literalist Christians literally believe that the earth is only like 6,000 years old or something. Like only 6,000 years old, because it says it in their Bible, right? As Muslims, how we approach scientific miracles is because one of the great things about the scientific miracles of the Quran is that every age, another scientific miracle gets proven by the Quran that we didn't even know about, right? Some scientific discovery will happen, and we're like, wait, Allah says that here, and we didn't even know it's a scientific miracle until it happens. And there's some scientific miracles that Allah talks about certain things in the Quran, and they're open to interpretation scientifically, even in accordance to the Quran and the Sunnah, right? And there may be scientific discoveries that actually prove those interpretations wrong. And what we do as Muslims is say, well, we must have misunderstood that ayat, and we make sure that the science matches up with what it says in the Quran, right? And here's a perfect example. It's generally been believed in Islamic worlds that everything revolves around the earth, right? The sun, the stars, everything, right? And popular science or popular theories, of course, we've been taught that everything revolves around the sun in our solar system, right? But when you look at the actual ayats, it could be interpreted both ways. And that's the beauty and the miracle of the Quran. Of course, as Muslims, whatever Allah says, that's the truth. We don't deny. If some science, like evolution, scientists say we came from monkeys and or from a single, no, Allah says how we were created very specifically. So we deny their quote unquote, which is not actually science, it's a theory. We deny their theory on that. So real quick on tafsirs, and we got a little bit of time left, so I'm kind of breeze through this end. There's certain principles of tafsir, and what I want to talk about is that tafsir, first, the Quran explains itself. Quran explains Quran. Then when you don't have the meaning of an ayat found in the Quran, then you look for the meaning of an ayat found in the hadith, in the sunnah. Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam explains the ayats. So you have Allah explaining himself, then you have Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam explaining the ayats, and then if we can't find a specific hadith and Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam explaining an ayat, then we look to how the companions understood it or explained it. So those are 3 levels. That's it, right? That's the methodology of tafsir. All right. And then you can derive more meaning from those understandings and stuff and how they apply today and that. But anybody just interpreting the Quran or giving meaning to the Quran offer their own, just thoughts and ideas, they are doing it wrong. Okay, so there's lots of classifications for being someone who can give tafsir or a mufassir, someone who can explain the Quran, right? And I wanted to point these out because this deals with our wheelhouse. Is you must have the correct beliefs. You must have the correct beliefs. You must be free of innovations. You must be free of bid'ah.
Yeah.
And you must have a sound understanding of aqeedah. So anybody who's engaged in bid'ah, anybody who does not have correct beliefs according to Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and anybody who does not have a sound understanding of the principles of aqeedah should not be given any explanations of the Quran whatsoever. You should not take that from them. You should not listen to them. Okay? So anybody saying that, I'm one with Allah, I'm Allah, we're together, we're the same, shouldn't be listening to anything they say. They should not be reading or telling you anything, the meaning of the Quran. Anybody that is making tawaf around shrines or going out in the dark and jumping up and down and doing chants and tying themselves up to as a form of worship, doing all these innovations, they have no place explaining the Quran. And the dangers of that are, and these are hadiths, is Rasulullah said, whoever speaks concerning the Quran with his personal reasoning, then even if he is correct, he is mistaken. Think about it. Just let that sink in. Rasulullah is telling us that if we explain the Quran with our own reasoning, even if we happen to be right, we're actually wrong. And a good way to illustrate this is, right, say for instance, say you're a judge, and there's hadith about this too, but I'm going to explain it in layman's terms. Say you're a judge, and someone comes to you and says, so-and-so stole my property, right? So-and-so stole my property. And you just take that person's word for it. You don't investigate the matter. You go and capture the person he accused, and you go and chop his hand off. Even if that person did steal, you erred because you made a judgment in ignorance, right? The same methodology, the same thought process applies to explaining the Quran, okay? And the more dangerous or the bigger, scarier hadith is when Prophet Muhammad says, whoever speaks concerning the Quran without any knowledge, then let him seek his place in the fire of hell. And this is very similar to a wording, and and actually, before we get off, we got to address it. Oh, Amr, could you find that screenshot of the one individual that was misquoting the Quran about Ahl Bayt? It's in our chat.
God,
You remember what I'm talking about?
I don't remember exactly, but everything's in our chat.
He was like, if you can't have two hearts, you can't be with your enemies.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I already found it. All right, mashallah. All right, look at that.
Okay.
I'm
gonna stop sharing. So you can pull it up.
All right. Let me. Do you want to show his name too, or no?
Yeah, it don't matter.
All right, cool. Thank God, because I don't care about sharing his name. Listen, Said Sultan Shah Jelani. All right, listen, Nick. Well, it's all you, fam.
So he says you cannot love both the Ahl Bayt and their enemies, and then which may, I mean, that first statement
could be true.
Is could be possibly true. We'd have to go into the Quran and the Sunnah and see if that statement is supported. But then what he does is takes a portion of an ayat and said Allah has not made for any man two hearts in his one body, and he references the Quran ayat. So if we went to the ayat, can you Google the ayat real quick? 33:4.
Yeah, I can. Hold on a second.
Go to the ayat, and if you went to the tafsir,
33:4.
Yeah.
All right, let me share my screen. Okay, so 33:4.
Yep, he says, so Allah does not place two hearts in any person's chest. That's the beginning of the ayat. The rest of the ayat says, nor does he regard your wives as unlawful for you, like your real mothers, even if you say they are. Nor does he regard your adopted children as your real children. These are only your baseless assertions, but Allah declares the truth, and he alone guides to the right way. This has no reference to Ahl Bayt whatsoever.
None at all.
Look at the truth there. But if you take a portion of anything out of context, you can have it mean whatever you want. If you're smart enough, or if you want to manipulate people, this is what you can do. So may Allah forgive him, may Allah guide him, and prevent him and others from misquoting or misusing the Quran, or from speaking about the Quran without proper knowledge. So let me go back to sharing my screen. Okay. All right. So that's the principles of tafsir. And let's talk real well, because we're about to be done in a few minutes. So translations. So real quick, there's lots of translations. Without translations, a lot of us wouldn't have any understanding of Islam or the Quran whatsoever. So there's different types of translations. So you have translations that are verbatim, right? Which scholars say that is actually forbidden to just have a sole verbatim tafsir, because it actually wouldn't make any sense to the people reading it in their language, right? Arabic and English have two different, I don't know what the word is, but mechanisms. Like we put adjectives after the noun. You know, like they put, like, there's all different types of different things that if we just had a verbatim translation, it wouldn't make sense and it would change the actual meaning. The translation is to give us the meaning, which is the second type of translation, is that the meaning is translated. And this is where you see like translations that they'll put in parentheses. You'll see a small ayat, right? But there'll be like a few sentences that actually give what that ayat means. That's the proper translations, because we want to know the meaning of the Quran, not just the literal translation, because we wouldn't understand it. And not the worst part of not understanding it is that it could change the meaning of the Quran, right? So just so everybody knows, pure English, or not English, pure translations in any language that do not contain the Arabic are actually not considered the Quran. They are actually not considered the Quran. This is why when you're given dawah, you can give an all English Quran to a non-Muslim to read. They don't need a wudu. They can just read it because it's actually not the Quran, right? So just wanted to bring that up. And just some problems that, we have a lot of benefits with translations, but one of the problems that comes up when we have translations is that we kind of lose the importance of the Arabic of the Quran, the Arabic language. A lot of us just settle in on like, okay, I can read Quran, I can recite it in Arabic, but I don't understand what I'm saying, and I can just read the English translation. As beautiful and important and all the lessons we get from the translations of the Quran, when we actually understand Arabic, it's a whole new level that cannot even be explained. Like, if anybody listens to Numan Ali Khan, our sheikh or our imam here in the Binghamton region, they went to the same school, I believe. But Numan Ali Khan, like, the school they went to is very big on Arabic language, right? And if you listen to any of the lectures, or when Numan Ali Khan like goes into explanations of the Quran, he'll talk for like a half hour on one word, and how perfect it is to define and explain what Allah wants to explain, and all the different like just one word. And that's what that type of understanding of our religion comes with understanding the Arabic of the Quran. And real quick, so Orientalists, for anybody who doesn't know, Orientalists, the best way to describe an Orientalist is non-Muslim Westerners that are interested in Islam, but aren't Muslim, right? So like they study it, they look into the Quran, they look at the Hadith, they know a lot about Islam, but they're not Muslim. They will even praise Islam. They'll praise Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. They'll praise the Muslims. They'll praise the religion. They'll do all that, but they actually never become Muslim, because to them it's more of like a curiosity or hobby. The only benefit a person can get out of, like, because they give tafsirs or explanations of the Quran, translations and all that, the only benefit of actually looking into their stuff is when we actually need to defend Islam from some of the things that they say. Because they'll say that the Quran isn't miraculous. They'll say that the Quran didn't come from God. They'll say all types of different things. But you even see on social media now, like, people quoting and sharing videos of the Orientalists just because they said something positive about Islam. But there's a big danger in that, because they're actually not trying to promote Islam. They're just actually trying to promote their own knowledge of Islam.
Yeah.
So if there's any questions, feel free to ask them now. I have our website up there, where if you guys wanted to donate to R2F, you could do that. We also accept zakat. If you wanted to contact us with questions or further discussions, or you're interested in having further discussions on these topics or any other topics, email us at the email address. And with that, so are there any questions that popped up? We didn't have many viewers today. They're not interested that much in actual
everyone's
Islamic
just busy.
concepts.
Everyone's just busy.
All right, so we went 5 minutes over. I think we're good. So next week we're doing Sahabas, right?
Yes, we're doing the 4 Sahabas.
And you're leading that one, right?
Yes, the Khalifa Rashidin. MashaAllah.
All right. All right. So I think we're all set. Alhamdulillah.
All right.
Right. You can close this out, Amr.
All right. اللهم ارزقني تفكري وتدبري بما يتلوه لساني من كتابك والفهم له والمعرفة بما آنيه ونبرأ في الأجواب أمام بذلك ما بقيت إنه على كل شيء قدير سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين آمين. السلام.
آمين. Salam.